I want you to read this page from the Killing Joke comic. Take a moment, indulge in it, soak it all in. And now I want you to read a similar setup from the Jing King of Bandits manga and ask yourself, what is wrong with this scene? Chances are you already came across the problem even if you aren't aware of it. Jing is one of my favorite manga series that's heavily influenced my philosophy of writing and narrative design, and at one point it made me want to write a comic series of my own. Many vapid attempts were made by myself and friends alike, but we never stopped to ask ourselves if we truly understood just how you write a graphic novel. It seems simple, but the structure and flow of manga and comics is something that never really caught my interest until earlier this year, when I saw a post regarding the flow of Dragon Ball, a discussion borrowed from one that had taken place in Japan prior. The reverse Z pattern was a solid concept and the article's main sticking point, detailing how the eye traveled across the course of a single page for easy reading, but the way it was deconstructed and analyzed along with the rest of the series left it as the right answer with the wrong method. So let's look and ask ourselves, just how do you make manga flow? First, you should recognize that any form of media is a representation of reality, and as such, how content is written must properly represent it. But how that's done is going to differ based on the medium, so what's comfortable might clash with pre-established ideals. Second, manga and any form of art is simply that, art, meaning design principles of a painting will often apply to a panel. The fundamental difference between paintings and graphic novels is paintings are digested as a single piece, whereas manga runs piece by piece to form a larger picture. Despite this, they share the same reading, even if the latter is laid out clearly for the viewer. So then the question with manga isn't how you make the reader move to the left, but how you make it as natural as possible. There are 5 categories we can divide this into: sound, weight, impact, motion, and space, all of which are used to guide the reader's eyes. No matter how you look at it, these 5 are essential towards an author writing a good graphic novel. But how does one string those together effectively? Although we're moving our eyes left, we always start the panel off on the top right. In most forms of media, the viewer is usually looking up at the top half of a frame for information, and the quickest thing we recognize are eyes and then faces. Using this knowledge, that means any focal point in panels outside a 1:1 ratio will often have the emphasized object to the far right, often in a spot aligned with the rule of thirds. I mention the 1:1 ratio specifically because of how easy to digest these panels usually are. The focus is immediately centered and any dialogue is easily consumed. The rule of thirds placement is important as it's the most comfortable spot for the reader, but it's not mandatory. Rules, after all, are meant to be broken. You've probably never realized it, but because manga reads to the left, characters tend to face that direction, and humans happen to have a habit to check and see what others are looking at. So this creates a simple line for the viewer to follow. You'll often find the best time to have a character look right is when the reader will shift their eyes to a panel in that direction. Anywhere else, and this would break the panel's flow, but in this example it doesn't. That sounds like it might raise issues if 2 characters are looking at each other, such as in here, but their traded eyesight creates a loop, making it a non-issue. Your guidelines are vital to highlighting the object a writer wants to emphasize. The more people are facing a certain direction, the more likely the viewer is to see what it is they're focusing on. Action and speed lines are another common tactic for giving weight to character movement or objects, often placing them in the center. On this page, although Krillin is placed and facing to the right, his washed out line work, flight path, and speed lines help de-emphasize him so it can pull the reader to the left and towards the dialogue. Here Vegeta and his ki are guiding us left and down, but once it's released, the explosion is placed on the far right as it's the focus. Impact lines create a link to Vegeta's arms, which also serve as an indirect line that connects us to his body and thus Vegeta himself. It sounds more artsy-fartsy than it is, but it's so basic most people don't even notice or think about it. In fact, Dragon Ball's greatest strength as a manga is probably its depiction of ki. They double both as speed and action lines to grant the focus extra weight. But in movement, ki blasts and flight paths acts as lines that pull the reader in the necessary direction, and their empty space commands their more weighted backgrounds. But what makes them better is the dash point, as characters tend to create large areas of empty space when moving, creating 2 connected spots of emphasis. The use of perspective helps create the necessary weight difference to make the viewer pay attention to one and then the other in an intended order. Speaking of weight, let's talk about One Punch Man and Berserk for a moment. These are 2 series I enjoy quite heavily, but for as much as they get right, they also get a lot wrong as well. Earlier I mentioned that it's easy to get lost in the details, and as much as I love Berserk, I feel it often falls victim to this. There's a lot of focus put into the backgrounds and clothes, so to contrast this, character faces and skin tend to use bold outlines and flat shades, often being white to further draw the viewer's eyes to them. Go too thick or thin and this emphasis can be lost, but this becomes problematic in larger scenes where certain areas command the viewer's eyes more than they should. Although everyone is looking at our heroes, their visual weight and higher contrast is so overbearing in comparison that everything else fades into the background, and suddenly you're looking left out of necessity, not because you want to, and thus the design has failed. This isn't the same for One Punch Man. Contrast is still there. A heavy black shadow on the hand followed by a white outline on the target to quickly grab our attention. The bold sound effect pulls us down to an emphasized fist, then an impact point of clear white space takes us down even further, and the action lines pull us to Saitama in the next page, and so on. The relative lack of detail around these focal points is important to note for two reasons. This acts as another form of visual weight. A key lesson frequently taught to artists is that focal point should have the most detail, because it's what the viewer focuses on most. Everything else will fall into our peripheral vision where details become blurred. If the viewer can still effectively read what's in their peripheral, then there's no reason to get caught up in its details. Some take this to an extreme, using no backgrounds whatsoever, but it creates easily read contrast with the setting for easy interpretation. Death Note used this sparingly. It'll often establish a new scene with backgrounds drawn in so the reader has a sense of spacing between characters, as well as an idea of what their environment is. It'll continuously draw in backgrounds when an unseen part of an area comes into play, or perspective needs to be established, but both before and after those moments it's quick to drown out those details, sometimes only using solid white or faint lines so the characters are what's in focus. It never gives the reader more details than necessary. Spacing might be the most important thing to note in a scene. Unlike cinema, where a director will often pick one side of a scene and stick to it, because of manga's structure and need for emphasis, it's easily ignored to keep moving left. So a sense of distance between characters is important so the reader can adjust themselves logically and quickly without trouble. Remove any sense of distance and the scene is harder to read because the viewer has no spatial awareness. The best way to think of it in this case is that you're reading the action, not the scene itself. But what makes that action truly stick with the viewer is its impact. In that One Punch Man scene from earlier, a lot was changed between one's original design and the serialized version by Yusuke Murata. Character positions, contrast, and environmental details are quite evident, but the biggest shift is sound, and there's a good reason. Sound is often used to convey three things: dialogue, effects, and atmosphere. The first is self-explanatory. It's purely focus-based, and proper placement can help pull the viewer to the left, no big deal. But effect and atmosphere are vital to creating those impactful moments, especially when it comes to positioning. Notice in one's version, the sound effect comes after the reach and after the grip. Yet in Murata's, they come before it and are placed deliberately based on how he expects you to read it. The sound almost always comes before the action it belongs to. In one's panels, because of the empty dialogue, reach, and sound, you're essentially reading it like this. That's a lot of inconsistent movement for the viewer's eyes, and it's quite unpleasant compared to Murata's, where the eyes only move left, down, and left once more. But this placement doesn't just make the eyes movement simpler, it makes that grab more impactful. By placing the sound before the action, the artist is setting the tone for what comes next, so it feels larger than it would otherwise. But by one placing the sound afterwards, we see the action and then the tone, thus we don't feel the effect. Think of it like this. If I fire a gun or make lightning strike near you, you see the flash and hear the shot at the same time, so it feels more impactful. But if I fire it from a much farther distance, you'll see the flash and then you'll hear the shot. The impact is lost due to a delay. But if that's how it goes, sound should be able to fit anywhere around the effect, right? Well, not necessarily. This is the second reason I find sound placement so important. Humans may see and hear things as what they perceive as being the same time, but there is a small yet significant delay. It can actually take 2 to 4 times longer for your brain to process sight than sound. It's why we react to the latter faster than the former. So in that sense, in real life, we also hear the tone and then see the effect. It's a representation of reality. If you read Dragon Ball, a lot of the effects come after the corresponding sound, creating that oh so delicious impact. If the effect stretches the whole panel, but the viewer is being pulled in from a previous row, the sound is often placed in the center where it will be the first thing the reader crosses. Even in panels like this where the components repeat themselves multiple times, the formula remains the same. In fact, this might be a perfect combination of all we've just talked about. Everything is placed deliberately, it's all giving weight and attention in a way that's pulling us left, and not once do we ever stop and question it. This medium isn't just a series of panels. It demands delicate and proper effort to make sure the experience is pleasurable throughout, and it's through the artist's mastery of these 5 components that it's made possible. The reader is always turning left and always captivated. In a world where there is no definitive way to write a graphic novel, you'll find not every artist is perfect, nor is every experiment successful. But sometimes the only way to know what works is to practice and grow as a creator. But if you can do it well enough that no one notices, you could have what it means to be true manga brilliance. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I know the wait lately has been pretty long, but I'm trying to speed things up bit by bit because this video was supposed to be out like last week. You all know the drill. If you like the video, show your support, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you already are, turn on notifications. And please help spread the word around. It'd really help the channel out. Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Reddit, anything. It all helps the channel out a lot. If you disagree with any of my points or want to offer your own, then please tell me in the comments. Trust me, I read them even if I only respond to like 1 or 2, and I did use that Dragon Ball analysis quite a bit in this because it had good points, but it focused so much on panel by panel that it wasn't really understanding why it worked. So I offered my own opinion of why it worked. In regards to my Patreon, I updated it so videos are now given to patrons 2 days early based on $2 donations, and Twitter followers get videos 3 hours early. The reason I did that was because I just didn't understand how Patreon worked at the time, and I thought I could hand it out to both separately, but apparently that's not how I can do it or something, or at least it's not letting me, which is really, really weird. I wanted it to be a single $1 and then $3 donation, but apparently I can only do that if it's like 5 and 10. So I'm sorry to anyone in regards to that who did do the $2 for 3 days, but I had to change it for this. If that doesn't tickle your fancy though, you can buy a shirt of mine. I have a one based off Mercy from Overwatch right now. Or hey, just go all in, gift me something from Steam. It'd really help me out because e-begging has never been so extreme. Thanks once more for watching. It means a lot to me and my family when you show your support. So I can't wait to see you again next time. Until then, much love. They double both his speed and action lines to grant the focus extra weight, but in movement, key blasts and flight paths act as lines that pull the reader. What the fuck? Key blasts and flight paths. It's such a fucking weird sentence.